Welcome back to Echo Report, bringing you the latest news from around the world. 4 months after Trump's trade war began, Canadians aren't celebrating, they're bracing for impact. The headlines promised American revival, but the reality is a self-inflicted wound. Broken promises, shattered alliances, and America bleeding more than anyone. While Washington picked fights, allies like Canada offered what the US couldn't: stability. The world didn't crawl back, it walked away, and America's economic dominance began to crumble. For decades, American and Brazilian agriculture thrived together, sharing technology, research, and trust. But the trade war shattered that trust overnight. Brazilian agribusiness turned to Canada, seeking stability and long-term partnership without political drama. Canadian firms seized the moment, guaranteeing support and joint R&D. In America's heartland, factories lost orders, jobs vanished, and research labs went dark. Supply chains and research agreements were rebuilt with Canada at the center. Canada's gain was America's loss: jobs, influence, and trust. And Canada quietly takes its place as the new partner of choice. Japan, always seeking energy security, once relied on U.S. liquefied natural gas. Multi-billion-dollar contracts and Gulf Coast jobs were built on trust. But the trade war brought political risk. Japanese leaders wondered, what if we're next? Quietly, Japan pivoted to Canada for stability and long-term contracts. Japanese consortiums pulled funding from U.S. projects, signing new deals with Canada. The silence at half-built terminals was deafening. Japan's silent divorce was executed with precision. No drama, just a new partner. And the global energy map was redrawn. German manufacturing is built on precision, and for years American suppliers were key. The trade war shattered that trust, making U.S. supply chains unpredictable. German automakers can't risk tariffs or sudden policy shifts on critical components. Methodically, they turned to Canada for stability and technological sophistication. Canadian firms in Toronto and Waterloo were ready, offering innovation without political chaos. German companies began dual sourcing, then made Canada their primary partner. Investment and intellectual property flowed north. American industrial towns lost not just factories but hubs of specialized knowledge. Engineers found their expertise obsolete as contracts vanished. The loss was profound. Decades-long relationships severed out of necessity. German industry didn't walk away in anger but with cold calculation. The U.S. was no longer a reliable partner. Canada became the new center of precision engineering, and American prestige faded, one lost contract at a time. For 25 years, North America was a single, integrated economy. Parts forged in Ohio, assembled in Mexico, finished in Ontario. Then came the rhetoric of walls and tariffs, shattering that integration. Mexican businesses, facing instability, began to de-risk by shifting supply chains away from the U.S. Canada became the haven of stability within the trade bloc. Mexican companies painstakingly untangled themselves from American suppliers, rerouting trade through Canada. U.S. border cities like Laredo and El Paso, once thriving on cross-border trade, saw business dry up. The seamless continental factory floor fractured. Jobs didn't just move, they vanished. The vision of a unified North American powerhouse was sacrificed for political posturing. Mexican firms chose Canada not for price, but for trust. The U.S. was no longer a reliable partner. The continental breakup was a self-inflicted loss of faith, and the pain was brutal, concentrated, and lasting. The U.S.-India tech partnership was once a defining relationship. Indian engineers fueled Silicon Valley, and American giants invested in India. Then the U.S. slammed the door, H-1B visas were squeezed, denials soared, and the message was clear: talent was no longer welcome. Canada seized the opportunity, launching a global skills strategy with fast-track visas and open arms. Indian tech talent flocked to Toronto, Vancouver, and Waterloo. Indian companies, seeking a North American base, chose Canada over Silicon Valley. Infosys and Wipro expanded in Canada, creating thousands of jobs once destined for the U.S. This was more than a brain drain, it was a total realignment. U.S. trade unpredictability made American firms unreliable partners. The foundation of the U.S.-India tech relationship crumbled. Innovation, investment, and joint ventures migrated north. Empty cubicles in Silicon Valley became a symbol of failure. The US lost not just talent but future founders and innovators. America pushed away a generation of wealth creators and handed them to Canada. This was a catastrophic, self-inflicted blow to US competitiveness. Canada became the new hub for global tech talent. The US lost its edge and its strategic partnership with the world's largest democracy. The tech exodus was swift, decisive, and irreversible. And America's loss became Canada's gain. South Korea, a global innovation leader, once relied on US partners for research and critical components. The trade war's chaos made American supply chains too risky for Korea's meticulously planned economy. Korean conglomerates pivoted to Canada, securing resources, stability, and high-tech collaboration. R&D facilities and university partnerships shifted from the US to Canada. Samsung, LG, and Hyundai invested in Canadian AI labs and battery research. American research parks and industrial zones felt the loss, jobs, contracts, and prestige evaporated. The global innovation pipeline rerouted through Canada. South Korea made a calculated move: divest from American instability, reinvest in Canadian predictability. It was a vote of no confidence in America's reliability. The US lost more than contracts. It lost its place at the forefront of global tech. Canada became the new innovation partner of choice. The US was left behind, watching its leadership slip away, and the world's most forward-thinking economies moved on. The US-UK special relationship was once a bedrock of global order: deep economic and cultural ties, seamless trade, and shared leadership. But as the US embraced aggressive unilateralism, the UK, already reeling from Brexit, looked for stability elsewhere. British businesses facing tariffs and threats turned to Canada, a familiar partner with shared history and values. The UK and Canada negotiated a new trade agreement, signaling a shift in economic allegiance. British investment began flowing to Canada, especially in fintech, aerospace, and life sciences. A new axis formed between London and Toronto, built on predictability and free trade. The symbolic damage was immense. The US alienated its closest ally. The UK's pivot was a stunning rebuke, showing American leadership could no longer be taken for granted. This wasn't just about trade, it was the collapse of a legacy. The US lost the trust of its most steadfast partner. The UK made its choice out of necessity, not malice. The special relationship was replaced by a new partnership with Canada. Trust built over generations was squandered in a few short years, and America's isolation became undeniable. This isn't just a trade shift, it's a global realignment. The US isn't being outcompeted, it's being abandoned by allies tired of chaos and dysfunction. From Brazil to Japan, Germany to the UK, the world's leading economies walked away from American instability and found refuge in Canada's predictability. The damage is measured in silent factories, severed partnerships, and lost trust. America promised greatness, but delivered isolation. We didn't lose a trade war. We lost the faith of our friends, and that's a loss from which it's infinitely harder to recover.